The morning Dale Warner arrived with his flatbed truck and a cashier's check for $87,000, Margaret Foster was in the north pasture counting stones. She'd been counting them for 3 weeks. Ever since the banker called her land unsellable and the Farm Bureau agent suggested she let it go back to the county for taxes. "Mrs. Foster?" Dale called from his truck window, boots crunching on gravel as he approached. "I'm here about the stones." Margaret straightened, her calloused hands resting on the measuring tape she'd been using. Behind her stretched 42 acres of what everyone in Harden County, Kentucky called the worst farmland in 3 generations. Limestone outcroppings broke through the soil like broken teeth. Fieldstone lay scattered across every acre, some the size of baseballs, others big as wagon wheels. The land her grandfather had died working. The land the bank wanted to foreclose on by October.
"You're the mason,"
she said. "Yes, ma'am. Drove up from Bowling Green. Got your letter." 6 months earlier, in March, the regional vice president at First Kentucky Savings had stood in her kitchen with printouts and apologetic expressions. "Margaret, I'm trying to help you see this clearly." Richard Foran said he'd gone to high school with her late husband. That made it worse somehow. "The soil tests show 8 inches of topsoil over limestone bedrock. The stone-to-soil ratio makes this land worth less than you owe. No farmer will take it. The best option is to deed it to the bank. Walk away clean." "This is my home." "It's a financial burden." He softened his voice. "Jim's been gone 2 years. Your daughter's in Lexington. There's no shame in accepting reality." After he left, Margaret walked the land the way her grandmother had taught her, not looking at what wasn't there, but seeing what was. The stones caught the afternoon light like scattered stars. Limestone, dense, fine-grained, the kind that split clean and held its edge for centuries. Her grandmother had been a stonemason's daughter before she married into farming. She told Margaret stories about the old days when Kentucky fieldstone built half the houses in the county, when a good wall was worth more than gold. Margaret started making calls. Every mason within 50 miles. Most didn't call back. Those who did said the same thing. Too remote, too much work to extract, not economical. Then Dale Warner's number came from a cousin in Nashville. "He builds custom work," the cousin said, "high-end restorations. Maybe he'll listen." Margaret wrote him a letter, included photos and the geological survey. 3 weeks passed. She'd started boxing up the kitchen when his call came. "I want to see those stones," Dale said. Now he stood in her field, squatting beside a limestone outcrop, running his hands over the surface like a jeweler examining gems. "This is oolitic limestone," he said. 450 million years old. See the fossil patterns, the density?" He stood, excitement making him talk faster. "Mrs. Foster, do you know what I could build with this? Walls. Walls, foundations, facades for houses that will stand 500 years. I've got clients in Nashville, Louisville, even some in Cincinnati. They pay premium prices for authentic Kentucky limestone. The new stone from quarries doesn't have this character, these fossils, this weathering." He pulled out a tablet, showed her photographs. Grand homes with stone walls, curved garden features, ornate pillars. "What would you pay?" Margaret asked. "Depends on volume and quality. But based on your survey," he calculated on his phone, "roughly 800 tons of recoverable stone. At current market rates for heritage limestone, processed and delivered, I could pay you $35 per ton for extraction rights. Maybe more if the quality is consistent." Margaret's throat tightened. "That's $28,000 for starters. I need to work this field for years. I'd pay per ton extracted. You could have steady income for a decade, maybe longer. The bank says I need to settle by October. That's 4 months. Dale studied the land, the outcroppings, the scattered fieldstone. How much do you owe? $82,000. He was quiet for a long moment. Then I could bring in a crew, work through summer. If the quality holds, I could do an advanced payment, but I need to test the stone first, confirm the grading, test it. That was May. By June, Dale had extracted and tested samples from 17 locations across the property. Every test came back grade A or better. He brought his business partner, an architect from Louisville, who walked the land and talked about heritage stonework and architectural gold. At the feed store, Tom Bradshaw leaned against the counter and said, "Heard you got some rock buyer poking around your place?" "That's right." "What's he gonna do? Build a pyramid?" Laughter from the man by the seed display. "He's going to pay for the stone." "Margaret! Honey!" Tom's voice went soft, pitying. "Those rocks aren't worth nothing. You're getting scammed." She bought her chicken feed and left. The bank called weekly. "We need a decision, Margaret. The foreclosure clock is running." In July, Dale came back with contracts and a plan. "I can advance you $87,000 against projected extraction over 5 years. It's a gamble on my end, but the stone's worth it." Margaret read the contract 3 times. Jessica drove down from Lexington, lawyer friend in tow, read it twice more. "Mom, this is real. This is legitimate." "The stones," Margaret said quietly. "Grandmother always said they were a gift, just waiting for someone to see their value." Now, in August, Dale handed her the check. "This clears the bank?" he asked. "With $5,000 to spare." "Good. My crew starts next week." Margaret held the check, felt the weight of it, not the paper, but what it meant. The land stayed. The stones finally were seen. The morning Margaret walked into First Kentucky Savings with the cashier's check, Richard Foran was in his office preparing foreclosure paperwork. His secretary called him to the front desk, voice uncertain. "Richard? Margaret Foster's here." He came out, saw her standing at the counter in her work clothes, mud still on her boots, saw the check in her hand. "That's—" He couldn't finish. $87,000, Margaret said, to clear the loan in full with closing costs. "Where did you—" He stopped himself, took the check, examined it. Real, legitimate. From a business account with a Bowling Green address. "Margaret, what is this?" "Payment for the stones. The ones you said made my land worthless." Behind her, Tom Bradshaw had come in to deposit his farm's payroll. He heard every word. By noon, half the county knew. Dale Warner's crew arrived the following Monday. 4 men with equipment Margaret had never seen on farmland. Hydraulic splitters, diamond blade saws, a small excavator modified for stone extraction. They set up a processing area near the road, began working the northeast corner where the outcroppings were thickest. Margaret watched them work with the precision of surgeons. They didn't blast or break, they extracted, found the natural seams in the limestone, split along the grain, lifted out blocks that weighed hundreds of pounds, free, clean, and intact. "The fossils are incredible," Dale said, showing her a piece with ancient crinoid stems fossilized in spiral patterns. "This will go to a museum restoration in Cincinnati. They're rebuilding a historic mansion's foundation. This stone matches the original 1840s construction perfectly." By September, the first shipment went out. 12 tons of cut and processed limestone bound for Nashville. Margaret received a check for $420, her first payment beyond the advance. Jessica came down that weekend, walked the extraction site, saw the organized operation, the careful work. "Mom, do you know what you've done?" "Kept the farm." "You've done more than that. You found value everyone said didn't exist." But the county wasn't ready to see it. At the October co-op meeting, during budget discussions for next year's grain subsidies, Dennis Wright stood up. He farmed 300 acres of conventional corn and soybeans, served on every agricultural board in the county. "I want to talk about responsible land use," he said, not looking at Margaret, 3 rows back. "We've got people in this county treating farmland like a rock quarry, digging up fields instead of planting them. That's not agriculture. That's mining." Murmurs of agreement. 42 acres that could be in production are sitting idle while some out-of-town contractor strips the topsoil. We should be asking if that serves our community. Margaret felt the eyes on her, felt the old dismissal dressed up in new language. The co-op president, Mark Shelton, spoke carefully. "Dennis raises a fair point about land use. Margaret, you want to respond?" She stood. Her grandmother had taught her not to argue, but she'd also taught her when silence was complicity. "That land couldn't grow enough to feed one family," Margaret said. "I know. I tried for 20 years. The stone-to-soil ratio made it useless for crops, but the stone itself, it's building homes that'll stand for centuries. It's employing 4 men full-time. It's keeping my farm out of foreclosure and keeping me in this community." "But you're not farming," Dennis said. "I'm doing what the land's good for. That's what farmers do. We work with what we have, not what we wish we had." The room went quiet. Then Sarah Shawn, who managed the organic vegetable operation on the east side of the county, spoke up. "My grandfather always said Kentucky was built on 3 things: tobacco, horses, and limestone. Maybe Margaret's just remembering that." The meeting moved on, but the tension stayed. In November, a writer from the Louisville Courier-Journal came out, did a feature piece. "Stone Farming. Kentucky Woman Finds Profit in What Others Called Waste." The article included photos of Dale's crew at work, quoted geologists about the quality of Harden County limestone, mentioned Margaret's struggle to save the farm. The phone started ringing. Other landowners with rocky, worthless ground, small farmers whose soil was too thin, too stony, too close to bedrock. "Is it real?" they asked. "Can we really sell the stones?" Margaret connected them with Dale, who connected them with other masons, other architects looking for heritage stone. A network started forming, people finding value in what they'd been told to abandon. But not everyone was pleased. The County Planning Commission called a hearing in December. Unregulated extraction operations. Margaret drove to the courthouse, found Dale already there, paperwork organized. "They want to shut us down," he said quietly. "Say we need mining permits, environmental reviews." The hearing room was packed. Dennis Wright sat in front, arms crossed. The commission chair, Harold Peterson, spoke from the bench. "We've received concerns about commercial operations on agricultural land. Mrs. Foster, can you explain what's happening on your property?" Margaret stood. "I'm selling fieldstone, same way farmers have sold timber or mineral rights or anything else their land produces. The stone was always there. I just found someone who values it." "But you're running a commercial quarry." "I'm extracting surface stone from my own property. No blasting, no deep mining, just removing what's been sitting on top of the soil for 10,000 years. Harold looked uncomfortable. "There are procedures." Dale stood. I have permits from the State Department of Natural Resources, environmental clearance, business licenses, everything's documented." He handed up a folder thick with paperwork. The commission took it, flipped through, looked at each other. They'd expected a fight, found compliance instead. "We'll review this," Harold said finally. Meeting adjourned. Outside, Dennis caught up with Margaret in the parking lot. "You think you're smart," he said, "but you're making real farmers look bad, making us look like we don't know how to use our own land." Margaret met his eyes. "Maybe you don't know how to use land like mine, but I do now." She drove home past fields preparing for winter, past the Christmas decorations going up in town, past the feed store where she'd been pitied for years. The stone extraction continued. The payments kept coming, and Margaret Foster, who'd been told her land was worthless, went to sleep each night knowing she'd found its worth herself. Not by changing what it was, but by seeing it clearly for the first time. The Planning Commission approved the permits in January, not because they wanted to, but because Dale Warner's paperwork was flawless, his operation compliant with every regulation they could find. Harold Peterson called Margaret himself to deliver the news, voice tight with reluctance. "You're clear to continue, but we'll be monitoring the environmental impact." "I'd expect nothing less," Margaret said. By February, Dale's operation had extracted 42 tons of premium limestone. Margaret's quarterly check was enough to cover utilities, property taxes, and repairs to the barn roof she'd been patching with prayer for 3 years. The land, for the first time since her husband died, was paying its own way. Then the architect from Louisville called, James Holbrook, the partner who'd walked her land the previous summer. "Mrs. Foster, I'm working on a project. High-end residential development outside Lexington. 20 custom homes, all specified for Kentucky heritage limestone facades. I need a reliable supply, about 200 tons over 18 months. "That's a lot of stone." "That's why I'm calling. Dale says your land can produce it, but I need consistency, quality control, dedicated output. I'm prepared to offer a contract, guaranteed payment, premium rates. You'd be a primary supplier." Margaret sat at her kitchen table, the same table where Richard Thornton had told her to give up. "Send the contract. I'll review it." Jessica came down that weekend with her lawyer friend again. They spread papers across the table, worked through clauses and terms. The contract was solid. More money than Margaret had seen in 30 years of farming. "Mom, this changes everything," Jessica said. "You could actually thrive here." "Could hire help," Margaret said quietly. "Dale's crew works the extraction, but the land management, the coordination, it's getting to be more than I can handle alone." "Then hire someone. You can afford it now." By March, Margaret had brought on Tom Bradshaw's daughter, Amy, who'd studied geology at Western Kentucky and came back to the county without prospects. Amy knew stone, knew land, and needed work. "My dad's not happy about this," Amy admitted on her first day. "I know." "He says he got lucky." Margaret showed Amy the survey maps, the geological reports, the extraction plans. "Luck is seeing what's in front of you when everyone else calls it nothing. Your job is to help me see it better." The spring brought a different kind of visitor. Other farmers, quietly now, without the scorn from before. Rick Malone, whose 40 acres bordered Margaret's on the south side. Equally rocky, equally worthless. "Margaret, I'd been thinking about your stones." "Yeah, if Dale's crew could test my land." "Maybe I'll give you his number. He's always looking for good sources." Word continued spreading. The Courier-Journal article had been picked up by regional papers, then agricultural journals. Margaret got calls from university extension agents, from geological survey teams, from PBS producers working on a documentary about sustainable land use. She said no to most of it. Yes to the extension agents who wanted to include stone farming in alternative agriculture programs. Yes to helping other landowners connect with buyers. No to documentary cameras and feature stories that wanted her to be a character instead of a farmer. In April, Dale brought his 13-year-old daughter to the site. Katie Warner wanted to be an architect, loved old buildings, spent her spring break watching the stone extraction like other kids watched movies. "It's like archaeology," she told Margaret, examining a piece with fossilized shells. "Every stone has history in it. Your dad sees that. Not everyone does. Do you?" Margaret looked across the land, scarred now from extraction, but productively scarred, purposefully altered. The stones that remained stood like monuments to what had been dismissed, what had been missed. "I see what it can become," Margaret said. The May co-op meeting had a different tone. Dennis Wright didn't stand up. The budget passed without commentary about land use. But afterward, at the coffee urn, Sarah Chun approached Margaret. "I'm starting a working group. Alternative agriculture producers, organic vegetables, heritage livestock, specialty crops. We want to make sure the co-op represents all kinds of farming. You interested? Stone farming isn't traditional agriculture. Neither is anything I do, but it's using land responsibly, creating value, sustaining families. Sounds like farming to me." Margaret joined. By summer, the working group had 6 members, was petitioning for board representation. The July payment from Holbrook's residential project came with a note. "Stone quality exceeds specifications. Requesting additional supply for second phase. Are you interested?" Margaret called Dale. "Can we increase production?" "I need another crew, more equipment, but yes, the stone's there." "Then let's do it." The second crew started in August. Margaret hired 2 more coordinators, Amy's boyfriend, who had environmental science training, and a retired mason from Bowling Green who wanted part-time consultation work. By September, the operation employed 9 people. The land that couldn't support one family's farming income now supported nearly a dozen jobs. Richard Thornton saw Margaret at the grocery store in October. He looked at her, looked away, then looked back. "Margaret, I owe you an apology. You were doing your job. I was wrong about the land, about what it could do." She could have let him suffer, could have held the grudge. But her grandmother had taught her that vindication wasn't about making others hurt. It was about proving what was true. "You saw numbers, Richard. I saw a stone. We were both looking at the same land." He nodded, grateful. "If you ever need banking services, I'll call you first." The first frost came in November. Margaret walked the land with Jessica, who'd driven down for the weekend. The extraction site was organized, professional, cut stone stacked by grade and size, equipment secured, the ground showing the careful work of people who respected what they were taking. "You did it, Mom," Jessica said. "Everyone said this place was finished, and you did it." "The land did it. I just listened." "You did more than listen. You fought for it." Margaret touched a piece of limestone, felt its cool, solid weight. Her grandmother's voice came back. "The land provides what it provides. Our job is to see it." 42 acres of stones. That's all it had ever been. But stones built homes. Stones made foundations. Stones, given to someone who valued them, were worth more than any corn or soybeans that thin soil could never sustain. In December, the holiday co-op meeting had a different feeling. Margaret brought cookies made from her grandmother's recipe. People thanked her, asked about the operation, told her about cousins with rocky land who might want to connect with buyers. Dennis Wright approached her as people were leaving. His face was older, tired. "I was wrong about you," he said. "About what you were doing." "I know." "That's it? Just, I know, Dennis?" "You wanted me to be wrong so you could be right. But this was never about you. It was about the land, teaching me what it was good for." He left shaking his head, but not in anger, in something closer to understanding. That night, Margaret sat on her porch, wrapped in her husband's old coat, watching stars emerge over the land that was still hers. The extraction would continue for years. Dale estimated another decade of high-quality stone, maybe more if they worked carefully. The payments would keep coming, employment opportunities would persist, and the terrain, overlooked by those who had solely focused on its challenges, would carry on yielding its inherent riches. A latent value awaiting discovery, a worth poised for recognition. Margaret Foster had preserved her enterprise, not by altering its essence, but by comprehending it. The very geological formations her ancestor had lamented, the stony deposits the financial institution had deemed valueless, the sedimentary rock that had been universally disregarded. They had always been present, enduring as the earth itself, anticipating someone to perceive them not as hindrances, but as blessings. She stepped indoors, to a dwelling where the hearth radiated warmth, the home loan was settled, and the expansive landscape unfurled beyond her abode, a testament to a fulfilled pledge. The subsequent day, Dale's team would resume their work. The quarrying operations would proceed. The stones, having rested undisturbed for 450 million years, would be unearthed from their subterranean repose, destined to form dwellings that would endure for countless generations. But this particular evening, Margaret found her rest.